Thank you so much, Mick, for being here. Do you believe the former president is guilty?
I have no idea, and I don't think most people do anyway. But keep in mind, if he's guilty of what they're supposedly charging with in Manhattan, it's a low-level misdemeanor married to a campaign finance issue. I think only John Edwards, to my knowledge, has ever been charged with this. Senator John Edwards 20 years ago, and nobody's ever been convicted of it. So it is an unusual sort of combination of things to charge a former president of the United States.
But you've said previously that you are pretty clear that he's going to be indicted. You were expecting an indictment. Why are you so sure? And would this be a good or bad thing for our country?
On this particular charge, look, I think if you look at all the accusations against President Trump, the real serious ones revolve around January 6th and his efforts to try and overturn the election. I think the thing with the documents in Mar-a-Lago is sort of lower grade. Certainly, I think the thing in Manhattan is lower grade. So I think that there's other things we should be looking at. But whether or not the president is guilty of a crime, I think is very interesting and should be discussed more broadly. But I don't think we should be focusing on what he did with Stormy Daniels 7 years ago.
Well, and I think a lot of people are saying there is the concern about the statute of limitations, the fact that this is being over-dramatized and over-politicized. But how does this affect the 2024 presidential campaign?
If anything, we think we saw a little small bounce for Donald Trump about a week ago after his initial, when he tweeted out that he might be arrested. There's sort of a sympathy vote. Even as he mentioned, his critics sort of don't like the look here, that it looks like the DA is going after him for political reasons. But there was some polling data out just last night that shows that Ron DeSantis is ahead of Trump in a theoretical matchup in both Iowa and New Hampshire. So it's hard to say what the impact of this, the criminal investigations are having on the president, if any. I still think he's the prohibitive favorite to win the Republican primary, but very interesting numbers out of Iowa and New Hampshire overnight.
Well, you're bringing up Ron DeSantis. Clearly, we don't know if he's going to run officially or not, but he is making his rounds more and more. In terms of some Republicans in the House, the committee chairs, recently they're clashing with the DA in this case, Alvin Bragg, over whether he should testify about this case. And then they mentioned the possibility of a subpoena. Alvin Bragg's office, so far, no comment. You're a former congressman. Do you believe that Bragg should have to face lawmakers?
It's a really good question. I think they're subject to. I think the federal government's allowed to go and do investigations, especially on how its money is spent. Keep in mind that's probably, if they do have a hearing, that's going to be sort of not the excuse, but that'll be the method by which they get one, which is they have a right to look into whether or not the money has been spent properly. But I think generally there's a concern on both sides of the aisle about the politicization of government, that the Democrats accuse Trump of going after his political enemies while he was in office. The Republicans are accusing the Democrats of doing the same now. The country might benefit from having a hearing about whether or not that is how the government's being used right now by both political parties. So maybe some good could come from it if it happens.
Yeah, we'll keep our fingers crossed. We could use some good right about now. Mick Mulvaney, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.